For the sake of time, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. When I was in school in India, the school I grew up in used propaganda mechanisms such as holding events during the school, which aimed at displaying how the school views parental authority and good mannerism, right? They used to do this one song about how you should care for your parents and you should never ever disobey them, right? And they'd make us perform that song during the annual function, do a presentation on it, right? Um, Specifically, we had school songs dedicated to that. We had mechanisms set up like parent teacher meetings, which happened very often, and often at times teachers would directly reach out to our parents instead of using us as middleman mechanisms to enforce this idea of authoritative discipline. It worked at the principle of authoritative discipline, right? uh, why did they do so? For two reasons. A, it's normative in India and a lot of East Asian societies that parental authority is supreme. Second, it was also because of business reasons. Because it was normative, it was useful for these organizations to use that as a business card, because they were essentially claiming that we will help enforce this ideal of parental authority to the at max at our place. This is why you should put our kids. Your kids will listen better to you if you do so, right? We think this whole idea is clearly trash, it's clearly problematic, it's clearly ridiculous. We'll give you principled reason as to why schools are principally obligated not to participate in this for their own profit. In fact, it's immoral for them to do so. And B, we'll also look at like stakeholders to understand, like, which is essentially the child in this case. Child is the central stakeholder, to understand why they are the most vulnerable stakeholder and what can we do that's good for them on four principal regards, right? So let's first understand like why this sort of like things work, right? So understand that there's often a double feedback mechanism where parents enable teachers' authority and teachers enable parents' authority. Essentially, what ends up happening is if anything that is done wrong, your voice is not heard, your parents will reach out directly to your teacher, your teachers will reach out directly to your parents, even if what you're doing is correct, even if your belief system does not agree to both of you, right? I used to have a teacher who would come at our home for parent-teacher meeting, and I've heard them talk about like Brahminism, since me, my parents, and them were Brahmin, and talk about, oh, he's a Brahmin, so he should be doing XYZ at school, like in order to like conform to that norm of how those things are happening, right? This uninvolvement of kids and this direct double feedback, which is enabling both the parents and the teachers, establishes that kids' opinion do not matter, right? It teaches them that you as a person do not matter. Wherever, and this enforces this sort of like value system, which is going to be a central point of this debate, that wherever you go in the society, you have to obey, your voice does not matter. It corrupts their value system, teaches them to appeal and not question things, specifically when said by those in authority, specifically said by those who normatively hold power, often at times elders, and believe in those systems and pass it on, and leads to like generational continuation of redundant ideas, which might have been proven problematic at other places, right? It teaches them it's whether your boss, your elders, anyone who's bigger than you, or even someone who's upper caste than you, to enforce that idea systematically, because that's the normative. Your school is doing that essentially. It's upholding what your parents think. And that's true even when they commit terrible things. Even if your parents are abusing you, your teachers will enable that idea that they are your parents. In fact, parents often at times will go to your teachers and say, maybe you're not using enough corporal punishment, and I give you full permission to. And this double feedback mechanism, by participating in that, they become immoral in themselves, right? Um, it's essentially like you give parental authority over free rational decision making. Often at times it's cast as racist beliefs about peers, where you're taught, oh, you shouldn't be interacting with these peers because of they're this caste, or because of this race, because your teacher and your parents are in that double feedback mechanism, or it might be negative connotations that might be leading to self-hate in queer children and even neurodivergent kids, where your parents hold these particular beliefs. Your school is coming out and telling you this belief is what it matters, and that's why this belief is what you should believe in, because your parents are saying so. And it can lead to self-hate that can cause extreme mental health issues, specifically in children. Children are very important. We'll get to that why. And it also reaffirms their beliefs, which are often held by negligence and passed on to them through similar mechanisms, which might be redundant, right? And we do not see a generational value shift in this case. Our stakeholder in this case is the child. Why is that the case? Because they're clearly the most vulnerable aspect of this debate, right? They are malleable because they're at that particular age. They are dependent, they're not independent, that they can move out without their parental support. And their value system is formed primarily through mechanisms of school and parents, right? Without a conflicting force, without schools telling them that parents should teach that authority, there's no way this will happen. So how do we determine like what's good for the child in long term? We've established value system, right? Like value system corruption can affect you far greater in the future. It can affect your mental health. Clearly, we win on that side. On the second metric, which is how it impacts their value system, that's directly correlated to like long-term impact. How it impacts their personal life, understand, again, as we have mentioned, things like abusive parents, self-hate, creates a bilateral, what we do creates a bilateral relationship, because if you're constantly skeptical of your parents, you can be on a level ground with them. You can have a bilateral communication rather than a communication of obedience through a subservient and a master relationship that clearly is being enforced in the other case, right? Why schools are principally morally obligated to do so? Because they're claimed to be an objective system, like the law, right? Like law is an objective system in society. Society deems them responsible for passing value judgment in these cases, because society often at times like holds them accountable. By the state debates over what should be taught or not, what should be the curriculum. And if you're passing on one value system, which is particularly that you should totally listen to your parents, which is the status quo, it's clearly problematic, right? If schools are objective, they should focus on that one aspect rather than like pursue one singular propaganda that they do. So now we think we are not telling them to like just disobey their parents. We're telling them instead of taking that stance, they should be teaching them to be skeptical. For these very reasons, we are very proud to propose.